welcome to another MEMO Chatcast. I'm Thomas Karakolis.
I'm Blake Martin.
Perfect. Dr. Blake Martin. How's it going?
Dr. Thomas Karakolis. It's going good. It's glorious outside today.
It is. It really is.
Yeah.
I wonder just before we start though, just we have explained on the channel before that that's kind of like a joke we used to do when we used to work in an actual office or like a workplace versus work from home.
Yeah. There's
seeing each other in the halls.
There's a lot of doctors, and we do see each other, and and we have to make sure that we call each other doctor.
I miss seeing you in the hall.
Yeah, I miss seeing you in the hall too. Usually a good time is had. Well, here we are. What are we talking about today, Thomas?
I'm thinking we talk about I don't know if it's a perceived conflict or just the difference, at least, between training modalities, specifically strength training versus endurance training, and the whole idea of power when it comes to those.
Cool.
That's kind of where we want to start. And I was hoping you could give me an idea of what you think the definitions of strength activity versus an endurance activity are.
Yeah, well, so, I mean, I think there's what people perceive as the difference between those things, and then there's what I might consider more at a physiological level, what the difference is. So if I was talking about strength, I'd be talking about changes in the ability to move or perform a maximal contraction. So if today you can lift 10 pounds and that's the maximum you can do, you can lift it once and that's it. Then if you're trying to get to be able to do that like 11 pounds, then that's strength training. Anytime we're trying to increase our maximal contractions, that is strength training. So you see sometimes in powerlifting, they're going to do a maximum deadlift, or they're going to do a maximum bench press, and they're trying for, one or two repetitions, very few repetitions, and they're contracting their muscles maximally. So that's very definitely what I'm referring to when I'm saying strength, is that we're somewhere in the 85 to 100% of our maximal contraction range. Endurance is anytime we're trying to do more of a less than maximal contraction. We might be talking 60 to 85% of what we're capable of, what our maximal is, and we're trying to do it several times. So if today I can only do it 3 times, lift 65%, let's say I can do pull-ups, and I can do 3 pull-ups, and that's what I can do right now. Now that's, I can actually do a pull-up with a weighted belt, so I can do more. So it's around 65 probably %. So let's imagine that I can do 3. And then tomorrow I'm trying to do 4. Then I'm pushing for endurance. Anytime I'm trying to increase the repetitions or duration of a thing, then we're talking endurance. And then power is simply strength as a relationship of time. So if I'm moving something really fast, the faster I move it, like a heavy thing over time, that's more about power. So that's the way I've been taught to define them.
I'm going to digress really quickly here, because I actually really enjoy doing these weekly chats with you, Blake, because I actually learn more about the way you think, which I absolutely love. Because I'm thinking back, though, and to what you just said, it sounds like your definition of strength training, endurance training, or power training has more to do with the intention. And I'm thinking back to a couple months ago when we had our conversation about activity versus exercise, and
Right.
Your definition was again based off of the intention of what you're trying to do, because you said exercise is the intentful or purposeful like conducting of an activity to improve like your health, your physical,
or performance in some regard.
Some regard.
Yeah.
Whereas an activity is something you do to actually like do something. So going for a walk could be
Right.
an activity
Right.
or an exercise, depending on why you're going for.
You're a really good listener, Thomas. That's.
And you're a good thinker, Blake. So tying it back into this conversation now, I like your definitions, because I actually didn't have a very good definition. That's why I asked you to start, because I'm hearing your definition of strength training is when you're trying to essentially increase the amount of like load that you can move.
Exactly, yeah.
Whereas endurance training is essentially the number of repetitions that you can do it for,
Or duration,
or the duration you can do it for. Perfect.
right?
And then power is kind of a combination where it's the amount of strength you have versus how quickly you can do that
Yeah,
strength.
yeah, yeah.
And it's all about intention. It's why you're doing the specific activity. So
Yes,
if your goal is to try and do, like, let's say push-ups, for example, have been, or like any sort of body weight exercise is kind of like a strength exercise or a strength
typically.
activity in my mind.
Yeah.
But if you're trying to do 50 push-ups or 100 push-ups, you would say that your goal, that's actually endurance training that you're trying to do.
Yeah, because it's the same weight, but it's just doing it again and again and again.
Hmm.
I would have to add load, have a nephew or something sit on my shoulders while I do it.
Yeah, and that would be strength training because now you're
Yeah,
trying to get stronger to
yeah.
actually move a larger load. I wonder what your thoughts are because my mind from would initially have gone to between like strength versus endurance training. I would have thought like basically aerobic versus anaerobic. So if you're doing something aerobically, that's endurance, but anaerobic is strength. Um, do you think that's a decent definition, or is it just too hard to figure out where you cross that threshold from anaerobic to aerobic, or vice versa?
Well, you can definitely. So that's a fantastic question. It's really good, and there is probably someone who we tend strength training does tend to be more anaerobic. So
Hmm.
anaerobic is when your body is not using oxygen as part of the fueling process. It's using other fuels, and so it's not an oxygen mediated thing. And aerobic is when it's oxygen mediated. And typically, anaerobic uh, activities tend to be under 20 minutes for most normal people, like non athletes, the regular Joe. And then, but you can push that up. You can do anaerobic, training, and I would argue probably that. Real 5 kilometer runners, like the racers, it's all anaerobic. That's my
Yeah.
guess. If you look at their lactate thresholds and stuff like that, but yeah, so it really depends. Strength training tends to be anaerobic, but you can have endurance training too, like that's just trying to get lots of repetitions. So if you do last week's Throwdown Thursday, for example, that's an example of anaerobic. That's definitely anaerobic, but it's not strength. It's just your body weight against you. It's something you lift every day, and I was trying to push you till till you throw up Thursday. But
Yeah. So I think endurance training can also be like psychological, right? I think there is like a mental component to endurance training where even if it's anaerobic, to keep doing it to push your body beyond, there's I guess a sustained mental effort.
yeah, but I mean, you could say the same thing for guys who are pushing big weight. Like, I mean, they might easily be able to pop out one more rep, but they just kind of they can't see it. So there is, and they're wrestling with it, and they've got this. There is so the psychology behind it. So but your point is really important. The psychological battle is real in both, I think, but I'm trying to think of how it's different
I wonder if
because
it's a more sustained psychological battle in endurance versus almost an acute psychological battle in a strength type of.
yeah, you've run marathons, right?
So
Yeah,
have you.
yeah, but the point is that there's those moments where you just want to stop, and in a marathon there's lots of them.
Oh yeah, tell me about
Yeah,
it.
it's just all the times where you want to say no, no,
Yeah,
I've taken enough steps. That was a lot of steps.
it's weird when, and I hope next week we can talk a little bit about the psychology of exercise because I'm really interested in that topic. But just to kind of delve in there, it's weird to me when you cross that threshold where you're just like, this is enough. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
yeah,
And it's hard because like I've never actually quit a marathon, and I don't know what
yeah.
it would take to make me quit a marathon. But I think people do quit marathons, right, where they don't finish.
For sure, for sure. Well, you raised a really interesting point here, and it's kind of a different take on this whole thing, and I wanted to come around to that. And it was, we were talking, and you talked about this difference, the way people perceive the sport that they're doing, and there's this kind of idea that they do strength training, or they do endurance training, but they don't see the connection or the relationship between the two different
Hmm.
kinds of training. So I was wondering if you could just talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I actually have a really good friend of mine, and we always have kind of a friendly, joking debate. I view myself as more like I enjoy endurance training or
Right.
endurance type activities more
Yeah.
than strength, and he's the opposite. He'd rather lift heavy weights in the gym
Right.
as much as he can, and I think it is how you perceive yourself, to be honest with you. I think
Hmm.
people, for some reason, some people perceive themselves as endurance athletes and other people perceive themselves as strength athletes. And I don't really have a good answer to your question about why people perceive themselves and why there seems to be almost like it's almost a conflict culturally sometimes where endurance athletes don't really view like they don't understand why guys will go to the gym and just lift heavy weights, and then vice versa. Someone that really enjoys going to the gym and lifting weights, he or she won't know why someone just wants to run for an extended period of time.
Right. Right. But there is a relationship. I mean, in serious athletics, any serious athlete who's trying to be a faster marathoner will get out and do track days and do 100-meter sprints, and
Hmm.
do 100-meter sprints with a parachute, or do hill running,
Exactly.
because they're trying to build their strength and also their power. They're trying to
Yeah.
have the explosive moments,
Yes.
because there is an interesting and important relationship. Any increase in strength does lead to an increase in endurance. It's not true in the same way. If I increase my endurance, it's not necessarily going to make me able to lift more, but it does enable me to work harder while I'm trying to lift more. So there's this relationship back and forth between the two. That being better at endurance does, it improves my cardiovascular fitness overall, allows for better delivery of nutrients and gases to and from my muscles, and allows me to be just way more efficient. So I mean, it's really useful. But yeah, there's this whole thing. No, no, no. I don't want to do the treadmill. That's stupid. Or I don't want to. I want to run. I just want to lift weights. Or I don't want to lift weights because that's. And there's this perception.
And but it's been shown to be wrong so many times in the literature is
Over
that
and over, over and over.
over and over. And it's like,
Yeah.
so I can keep running and I'll get faster at running to a certain point. I'll probably plateau or it'll be harder to make gains. But if I go to the gym and do something different, but if I target it and it makes sense to my running, I can actually probably make the same gains, if not more gains, by doing something in the gym and then go out running less often. And I guess it's because it's counterintuitive. That's why people seem to reject that idea sometimes.
Well, you've touched on 2 points there, and you've touched on, like, first of all, the idea of periodicity, like how we increment any kind of training if we're trying to get better at a thing. If we're incrementing training and changing the training, the way we place it in a calendar month or over the course of a year, those things are going to have impacts on our development, and as an athlete. But also there's the aspect of doing a complementary training that develops the muscles in a different way. So it's not just about just having those different phases and times where you
Hmm.
know you're focusing in on different things, but you're also using the muscles differently that will develop them in unique ways, and then allow you to push forward as well. So I think that's really important too. And I think, can't we all just be friends, Thomas? Can't the strength, the strongos and the enduros, can't they just get along?
That's so you're reading my mind because I think it's about time probably for us to wrap up with our kind of takeaway messages or take home thoughts tying back to memo. And that was exactly what I was thinking is beyond that, just so yeah, I think everyone should just be friends. And to me, it doesn't really matter what you do. As long as you're moving early and moving often, I think you're going to see some sort of health benefit.
Said like a
And
pro.
but ultimately, I do like the idea of training across modalities. So
Yes.
someone that views themselves as a endurance athlete and prefers to do endurance stuff, if they're already really active, they should consider switching over and doing more strength stuff, and vice versa. If someone is already active and they do a lot of strength training or strength activities, if I was them, I'd consider doing the opposite. So as someone that does more endurance stuff like running and cycling, I know I need to do more strength tough stuff, and that's probably where I should really focus my efforts. But vice versa, if I was more of a strength guy, I'd probably switch the other way.
I think we've all learned something here, Thomas.
Well, that's every day, Blake. That's the goal. Um,
Absolutely. Well, I think that's like you said, it's a good place to close it off. We can take what is good about different kinds of training and we can incorporate them in whatever we're doing. And the greater the movement diversity as well, the better health we're going to have. So I think that's a real good thing to focus on.
awesome.
Awesome.
I will see you next week, Blake.
Yeah, you will. Yeah, you will. Have a great afternoon.
You too.